Coming to paperback and e-readers, E-Steam Cancel Vacation. Hell's aspiring angel takes on a social justice social media mob looking to cancel her in this all-new E-Steam series adventure. Pre-order E-Steam Cancel Vacation on Amazon.com today. One of my viewers wanted to know how they would set up a budget for putting together a children's book. And this is a subject I have a lot of experience in, having 10 years working on the SJS Direct imprint on all ages books, such as those in the ISIS series. Now, after working for so many years on all ages books like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, and the John Haynes series, I have learned how to put together books for readers of all ages. So, putting together a book for young readers like children, I can tell you how you're going to set up your budget for that project. Now, usually for a typical novel like a Spellbound, the budget can be anywhere from $5 to $10 because I just use stock photos. But when it comes down to a much more complex project like a children's book, you're going to need a budget of anywhere, as I see it, from $3,000 to $5,000. Now, you want to be able to have that type of money because what you want to do is have money just in case there are some setbacks, and you also want to be able to have money on hand just in case you wind up into some issues as related to cost overruns. Now, on a typical all ages book project like I do, usually it breaks down into different components. Now, the first component of a children's book is the manuscript. And when you're doing a manuscript can be anywhere like these ISIS series books, which are about 80 pages, or they can be a smaller book, which is about maybe 20 to 32 pages. And on that book, you want to make sure that your manuscript is telling the story that you want to tell, and you want to be able to make sure that your story is where you want it to be. Because the main thing of a book project is making sure that the manuscript is on point, because once you start spending money on this project, you're going to wind up in serious problems if you keep changing up the manuscript. So you really don't want to go out here and keep changing up the manuscript as you're going along, because that's going to make it where the project winds up getting stalled. So you want to make sure that your manuscript is creatively where you want it to be. Now, usually when I'm writing a manuscript, I make sure that I answer 3 critical questions I learned from screenwriting. The first question I ask is, who is the main character? The second question is, what do they want? And after I ask that, I ask, what obstacles are in that character's way? And the third question I ask is, why should the audience care? Now, after I answer those questions, I then think about the audience I want to target that book for. And with a book like the ISIS series, I usually go out here and target that book for readers that are as young as about 8 or 9 years old. So I usually try to make sure that my manuscript's language is something that an 8 or a 9-year-old can easily read, and then I go from there, because that is the core audience that I was going for with the ISIS series, because it's all ages, but I want to make sure that young readers can start with this book and then be able to understand it and make sure that it's easy to follow. So that's what I do in the case of an ISIS series book. After I figure out those 3 critical questions, I then think about the core audience I'm going for, and then I make sure that my book is something that that audience is able to read. And now after I do that, what I do is I write and make sure that my story is on point. And then after I make sure my story is on point, I then begin my editing process. Now, when I do my editing process, it's usually in-house because I have so many years of experience working on manuscripts. But a person like the reader, like the viewer, they're going to need a freelancer to look at their script. Now, you really want to get a freelance editor to look at your manuscript, because having a second set of eyes does two things. One, a second set of eyes gives you an objective perspective on your story, because this person is seeing your story as the audience would see the story. And two, this person can point out issues in the story that your readers might possibly have with the story. So a good objective editor, what they're going to do is they're going to be the advocate for the audience, and as the advocate for the audience, they're going to make points to you, the writer, about what's going on with your story, and if the story is in a place where it's appealing to the reader. Now, a good editor's services are well worth the money, and you need to be prepared to pay anywhere from about $750 to maybe $1,000 for a good editor. And a good editor, again, is going to really take that critical analysis of your story, take a critical analysis of the characters, take a critical analysis of everything, and they're going to make sure that your story is where it needs to be. Now, I've done some freelance editing here and there on different projects, and it's a lot of work. I can tell you that it's a lot of hours sitting in front of a keyboard and a screen looking at somebody else's story and looking to make sure that the story is flowing and is consistent, where your character's actions that on one page follow to the end of the story, making sure that the characters are well developed, and making sure that the storyline is easy to follow. So an editor does a lot of work on a book, in addition to checking for spelling, punctuation, grammar. A editor goes out here and they clean up things like sentence structure issues, or they'll point it out to you so that you can clean it up. And they go out here and they make sure that this script is on point so that you can get to that next stage as related to publishing. Now, that's what the editor does, and again, their services are well worth the money. Now, after you've gone to the editor, you're going to want to go out here and focus on, and you've gotten your script ready, you want to focus on what your book is going to look when you're doing the final page layouts. Now, page layouts is another part of the process after you've gotten your manuscript edited and ready to go. And when you're doing children's books, that means you're going to be focusing on how you're going to lay out your pages. Now, some children's books, they feature illustrations on the inside, and when you're featuring illustrations on the inside, then you need to really start to work on your logistics. So when you're doing a children's book, you really want to focus on, after you've done your story, where are the illustrations going to be when you lay those pages out? How are those illustrations going to be set on a page? And where do you want, and how do you want the illustrations to flow in sequence? So, for example, a book like A Curious George, which has illustrations on every page, you want to be able to make sure that your illustrations are where they need to, where you want them to be. So you want to make sure that you're focusing on, okay, I have this page where it's chapter 1 or it's the first page, and you have to think about what type of images you want in your book. So that's something you need to really think about before you go out here and contact an artist. So the first thing you want to do is go out here and really think about what your characters want to look like, what your character designs are going to look like. And oftentimes I do that myself. You know, I go out here and I'll sketch up characters on loose leaf paper or sheets of paper or even envelopes. I'll just go out here and sketch up a character or a character design. I have them all over the place. I will sketch up, you know, different characters to see what they look like. And after, I've sketched up those characters, then I have a sense of what I want them to look like, and that's where I go from there. Now, I'm not the best artist in the world as related to sketches, but the sketches are something that give the artist something to work with. So before you even contact an artist, you have to think about what you want on your pages, and you have to think about the images that you want to tell a story, because every image on every page has to tell a story, and each image has to work towards moving your story forward. So you're going to have your images in the book, but each of those images need to be something that tell that part of the story as it moves the story forward. So usually what I do is I sketch up these characters as model sheets first, and then I go out here and I sketch up the concept for the covers of books like Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess. I will sketch up a concept for the cover, and then from there I have the blueprints that I send out to an artist like Bill Walko, who designed this cover for Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess. Now, that's something I usually do on some of my books. But again, before I even go out here and contact the artist, I'll go out here and I'll contact an artist. Before I contact an artist, I sketch up a concept. Now, I have another concept of E-Steam Cancel Vacation, and this is another one that I just did a rough concept of and before I sent it to Bill Walko. And this is the kind of, before I do these covers and send them to Bill, I sketch it up. So that's what you have to do on a cover, and then after you do it for the cover, you then have to do it for each page in the book. If it's a picture book, you have to do it for every page, but if it's for a chapter book, you might have to do an image here for every front for every chapter before it opens. So it depends on what type of book you're doing, but you have to figure out at least what type of story you're going to tell on your cover, because your cover is the most important image on the book. This is the image that is going to set a first impression on the reader, and this is the image that is going to get the attention of the reader. For example, for Isis Revenge of the Cyber Goddess, I show you Isis taking on the Cyber Goddess high above New York City, and that shows the action that gets your attention. This is a homage to a comic book cover, but the whole thing is I want to get your attention with a compelling story on the cover. Same thing here for E-Steam Cancel Vacation. The image here is all about showing you the impact of cancel culture on someone, and I'm telling the story about how it affects people. So you want your cover to be strong, and you want your cover to leave a powerful first impression on people. Now, your interior illustrations will also have to leave a powerful first impression on people, and you really need to make sure that you're, again, thinking about the story you're telling on each page. And again, each image has to move the story forward until you get to the conclusion. And you have to think about that, because just as you put the prose words down, the image has to tell the story as well, because with young children, they are very visual, so you have to make sure that your images are very clear, and you have to be clear about the images that you're telling the artist to go out here and draw. So one of the things I learned from comic book writing is how to tell the artist what to draw, and usually I do that with storyboards like I use for many of my covers, or I go out here and I have a script that I work with when I'm doing a comic book. So when I'm doing a comic, I may have a comic panel where I say, for example, Death's black manicured hand swipes from her schedule on her smartphone to John's picture, and her train of thought is broken by a flash of light across the room. So that's giving the artist an image in their head that they draw and turn into pictures, and what you want to do is create images that tell your story when you're going out here. Now, some art writers do this with sketches and hand-drawn pictures, like I do for covers, and others do it by just writing out what they want. So it varies from author to author, but those images that you're doing, they're essential before you go out here and send it to an artist. You have to know what you want drawn if you're doing a children's book as related to images before you go out here and send it to an artist. Because if you don't know what you want and you don't tell him what you want, he's going to draw whatever he wants, and that may not be in what you're looking for. So that's why you need to have things like model sheets. That's why you need to have things like concept images, because these are the type of tools you're going to need in order to be able to get your book put together. Now, after you've gone out here and laid out what you want your pages to look like, then you can go out here and start contacting artists. Now, usually when I'm looking for an artist to illustrate a project, I usually go to comic book artists, because comic book artists, that's what I grew up with. And a lot of comic book artists, they are looking to be open to other kinds of illustrations. So if you do children's books, you might want to go to a Facebook group like Comic Artists Seeking Commissions or Comic Writers Seeking Commissions. Usually a lot of the pros there, they're looking for work, and you can probably get some decent rates. Now, your comic artists usually, or your illustrators, they work on a page rate, so you need to really factor that in when you're working on your budget. Now, this is why I said your budget needs to be anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000, because after you do the editing, then you have to hire the artist to do the art for the illustrations. Now, again, an artist page rate can be anywhere from $80 all the way up to $150, depending on who you use or how many services that you use. Now, if you hire an artist and you just want them to do illustration, again, depending on who they are and depending on what their rates are, it can be anywhere from $80 to $150. And some artists, they might be nice to go out here and lay your page out, but usually they usually just finish it, do it at the illustrations, and they move on. Now, if you want to hire somebody to do the page layouts for you after you get the illustrations, that's also some extra money. So that you have to factor in those costs when you're putting together your project. So an artist, illustrator, they work per page. So you have to go out here and add up how many pages your story is and how many images you're going to need. Now, if you're just using an illustration per chapter and you're doing a book like Revenge of the Cyber Goddess, which has, let me see how many chapters this has. This has 24 chapters. So if I did this book, I would need 24 illustrations. Now, 24 illustrations times anywhere from $80 to $150. That's going to be the cost of your illustrations. So we're going to add that up right here. And 24 times, let's say 80, that's going to be $1,920. And if we did this with a more high-end comic artist, 24 by 150, that's going to be $3,600. So it depends on what artist you use, but it's going to cost some serious money as related to your budget. So that's a major chunk of it, but there are ways you can go out here and lower those costs. You can go and find artists in Europe or the Philippines or South America, and that can help be a way for you to lower your costs. And I definitely do not recommend you go over to Fiverr, because Fiverr is garbage tier artists. They're not really high quality, but a true quality artist is well worth the price. And if you can build a relationship with an artist, then you can go out here and get a great quality project. So it depends on who you go out here and hire and if they're enthusiastic about your project. Now, the one thing I look for in an artist, like I did for the John Haynes at Death's Door project, is passion and enthusiasm, and that's what I got from Antonio Balderi. He did a fantastic job on the comic, and I look for that with Bill Walker, who does fantastic work on the ISIS and E-Steam series. I'm always looking for an artist who is excited to get to the project. So you really want to go out here and get an artist who is passionate about their work, because that heart is going to come out on the page. Now, after you've factored in your budget for your art, you also want to factor in your other costs as related to the project. Now, when it comes to that point of the project, you want to start thinking about, after you've done your page layouts and put together your project, you're thinking about putting the things together in Adobe Acrobat or Adobe Illustrator. And after you've got your PDF, you really want to start thinking about things like your page size, and you really want to start thinking about your overall finished product. Oh, I also forgot to talk about the cover. A good cover is going to be anywhere from $250 to $500, so you also need to factor in that cost as well. So if you're doing a children's book, you're looking at the cover, which is $250 to $500, and then you're looking at the art, which may be $80 to $150 a page, and if it's color, it may be even more. So those are also costs too, because it depends on what the rate is, varying from artist to artist, because you also have to factor in whether it's going to be black and white illustrations or color illustrations, because usually if it's color, it might be a little more, so you need to factor those costs in as well. Now, after that, you want to start focusing on your page layouts and as related to the final product, which you're going to be putting in Adobe Illustrator or Adobe Acrobat. I mean, some people use Microsoft Word, but eventually you're going to need the Acrobat to make the PDF. So you really want to go out here and get the Adobe software, because that way you get the highest resolution, and the highest resolution means people can see your images very clearly, because if you do put the images in Microsoft Word, they're not going to be very clear, but you want to use the Adobe because it has the highest resolution. So after you get those services done, you'll get your PDF, and then after you get your PDF, you want to go out here and upload it to whatever distribution site you're going to be working with. So you have to choose what distribution site you want to work with, whether you want to work with Lulu, KDP, which is Amazon, or you want to go over to Ingram. And Ingram has fees as related to theirs, and you also have some things as related to registration. KDP is free, and usually you just pay for your proof, and Lulu is free as well. So you have to decide which one you want to go to. Lulu is more of like a vanity project, so you can just print one-off copy and then have it for you. KDP is good for distribution to Amazon, and it's really slow to get to other online booksellers, but your Ingram is very good if you want to get to all the booksellers, and your Ingram will get you in every store all over the world. I mean, when I had SJS Direct with Lightning Source, which is a part of Ingram, it was in every store all over the globe, but Ingram has some very high fees, and you have to really think about where you want your book distributed, and what type of distribution is good for you. So right now I'm using KDP because it's good for me, because most of my audience is online. But if I wanted to expand my distribution, I definitely would go back over to Ingram and do books over there. But I stick with KDP because distribution is good for my audience, because my audience is mostly online. But if I were to start stepping into convention circuits and things like that, then I would probably move over there. But if you go to Ingram, you're going to need an ISBN, which is $178, and then $25 for a barcode. And you're also going to need somebody to be able to put that barcode on the back of your book. But with KDP, they'll do that for you. And Lulu, I believe, will do that for you as well. But if you go over to Ingram, you're going to need that $179 for the ISBN, and you're going to need to do that. Now, you also will need money for the copyright if you publish, and you will need to register your book with the Copyright Office. I think it's about $50 right now. So there's a lot of different costs. And again, that's why I say you need anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 if you want to go out here and do a quality children's book. Now, the rates can vary from person to person, and you might get lucky and find a couple of freelancers who will do things for a little bit of a lower rate, but you also need to factor in costs as related to issues, because issues are going to come up. You will, even if you have a professional editor, still run into typos. You'll still run into stuff that's running a little bit off the page when you have your proof. But if you work effectively, you might be able to catch all this stuff early on, and you can mitigate your losses on those types of mistakes. Now, they've come up with me, and again, that's why I go out here and order a proof copy to check everything over so I can catch those mistakes. And then when I catch those mistakes, I can then go out here and be able to upload the final product and make sure that the final product is absolutely right. So it's a major challenge, again, getting these books out here, and I'm hoping that this video helps the viewer be able to better understand the process, because it's a very rewarding thing to go out here and be able to put together your own book, whether it be an all-ages book like the Isis and E-Steam series, or a full novel like I do, like Spellbound. It's very rewarding to get those books out to readers, and I'm hoping that this video helps that viewer be able to put together a quality book, and I'm hoping that this helps them be able to understand the process and many of the costs that are involved in it. Now, this video was a requested video from the viewer, and if you want to request a video, you can donate to the Cash App by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to pick up some of the great all-ages books on the SJS Direct Imprint, like the Isis series and the E-Steam series and the John Haynes series, you can find these books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them in digital format on Smashwords, the iBook Store, and Google Play. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, E-Steam Blast from the Past. Hell's aspiring angel takes on her demonic doppelganger in this action-packed, time-traveling E-Steam series adventure. Get E-Steam Blast from the Past with a bonus E-Steam comic book, No Good Deed, in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere.